Let me ask you something personal. Right now, today, March 1, 2026, if you own somewhere between 100 and 1,000 ounces of physical silver, those bars or coins sitting in a safe, in a vault, in a drawer wrapped in cloth somewhere you trust, do you actually know what you are holding? Not the weight, not the spot price, not what you paid for it. Do you understand what your stack has become? Because something changed in this market in the last 60 days that most silver holders, including people who have been stacking for years, have not fully processed. And the ones who miss this shift are not going to lose their silver. They are going to lose something arguably more valuable. The strategic advantage they spent years building, quietly, patiently, when almost nobody else was paying attention. Tonight, I am going to walk you through exactly what changed, exactly what it means for your specific position, and exactly what the people who get the most out of this moment are going to do differently from those who don't. Welcome. I'm AG Jack OG, analyst, market strategist, and the brother of AG John OG, whose work on global monetary realignment and the hidden architecture of commodity markets built this community from the ground up. We share the same framework, the same late-night obsession with following capital flows where headlines refuse to go, and the same belief that the most consequential financial shifts of this decade are happening right now, not in the future, but today, this week, this month. If you are new here and you want to understand what serious money actually sees when it looks at precious metals, subscribe right now. This is the room where that conversation happens. Now, let's talk about your stack, because this is the most important conversation you will have about it all year. Silver closed Friday, February 27th, 2026 at $94.52 per ounce. Gold finished at $5,292.66. Silver is up 289% since January 1, 2024. Not 2 years ago, not 5 years ago, 26 months ago. If you own 100 ounces of silver today, your stack is worth approximately $9,450. A year ago, it was worth approximately $3,000. 2 years ago, it was worth around $2,400. If you own 500 ounces, you are sitting on approximately $47,000 of value right now. If you own 1,000 ounces, you are holding $94,000 in a metal that most of the people you know have never seriously considered owning. Now here's the question that my brother sent me late last night that I cannot stop thinking about, and that I want you to genuinely sit with before we go any further. Were you ready for this? Not emotionally, strategically. Do you have a plan for what you do now? Do you know the difference between what your stack was 2 years ago versus what it has become today? Do you understand that the strategic position you occupy right now, as someone holding physical silver at a moment when the global supply chain for this metal is fracturing in ways that have never occurred before, is fundamentally different from anything the conventional silver stacking community has ever prepared you for? Because most silver holders right now are operating with a 2019 playbook in a 2026 market. And that gap between the old mental model and the current reality is exactly where wealth is either captured or left on the table. Let me show you what changed. Not in theory, in documented, verifiable fact. The first thing that changed is the nature of the buyers competing for the same metal you are holding. In 2019, when most serious silver stackers were building their positions, the competition for physical silver was relatively straightforward. Retail investors, some industrial buyers, a handful of speculators in the ETF market. The price discovery was dominated by the COMEX futures market, which traded approximately 250 times more paper silver than physical silver existed in registered inventory. It was a paper market with a thin physical floor, and everyone who understood this was waiting for the floor to eventually matter. The floor is mattering now, but the buyers who showed up when it started mattering are not the buyers anyone predicted. Samsung, not a silver investor, not a precious metals fund. Samsung, one of the most sophisticated technology conglomerates on Earth, whose engineers are designing the battery systems that will power the next generation of electric vehicles, walked into the silver market in October 2025 and did something that should have made every silver stacker on Earth sit up straight. They financed the restart of a previously idle silver mine in Durango, Mexico, the La Paria complex. $7 million in prepayment financing to bring the mine back to life. And in exchange, Samsung secured the contractual right to purchase 100% of La Paria's silver output for 2 full years. 100%. Not a portion, not a supply agreement with flexible terms. Every single ounce that mine produces for the next 2 years belongs to Samsung before it reaches the open market. A procurement manager at a major technology company just told you something critical through that contract. They did not go to COMEX to buy paper silver. They did not send traders to the spot market to accumulate gradually. They went directly to the source, a mine, paid to bring it back online, and locked the entire output before a single ounce was produced. That is not a financial trade. That is a strategic resource acquisition. That is the behavior of an organization that has looked at the silver market and concluded that waiting for spot market availability is not a reliable strategy for their supply chain going forward. And Samsung is not alone. This is the beginning of a pattern, not an isolated event. The second thing that changed is the supply curve. And this one has implications that stretch far beyond the next earnings report or the next quarterly trade. Every major silver mine that would be brought online in response to today's high prices, the mines that geologists are identifying right now, the exploration projects that received funding when silver crossed $50, will not produce a single ounce until somewhere between 2033 and 2036. That is the geological and regulatory reality of mining. 8 to 12 years from discovery to meaningful production. The high prices of 2026 are planting seeds that will not be harvested for a decade. In the gap between now and then, the only silver available to the global market is the silver that already exists above ground. In registered COMEX vaults, now below 90 million ounces and falling. In the recycling stream, approximately 180 to 190 million ounces per year, which has barely grown in a decade because the silver content in most modern applications is so small and so diffuse that recovery is economically marginal. And in private hands. Which brings me to you. The 100 to 1,000 ounces sitting in your safe is not just personal savings denominated in metal. In a world where Samsung is locking up mine output before it exists, where China has restricted silver exports to 44 approved companies, where Fresnillo, the world's largest primary silver producer, has cut its 2026 production guidance, and where the Silver Institute has confirmed 6 consecutive years of structural supply deficit, with a cumulative shortfall approaching 900 million ounces, your physical silver represents something that is becoming genuinely scarce in the tradable market. Scarcity is not abstract. Scarcity has a price. And what we are watching right now in real time is the market beginning, just beginning, to discover what that price actually is. The third thing that changed is the identity of silver itself. For decades, silver existed in a financial no man's land, too industrial to be taken seriously as a monetary metal by the institutions that manage sovereign reserves. Too monetary to be purely analyzed on supply and demand fundamentals like copper or zinc. It was perpetually caught between two worlds, and therefore not fully priced for either. That is ending. Right now, in 2026, silver is undergoing what one of the most detailed commodity analyses published this year called a transition into a three-identity asset: industrial, monetary, and now, for the first time, strategic. Strategic means governments and major corporations are beginning to treat silver the way they treat rare earth elements, not as something you buy when you need it at market price, as something you secure in advance through contracts and direct investments and supply chain lockups, because the risk of not having it is existential to your operations. When silver becomes a strategic asset in that formal sense, when procurement departments and national resource planners treat it as a material that cannot be left to the open market, the pricing mechanism changes fundamentally. You are no longer competing with other investors for silver. You are competing with supply chains, with governments, with technology companies whose entire product roadmap depends on a steady supply of a metal that the earth is not producing fast enough to meet the demand for. That is a different competition. And the people who got in before that competition started, who stacked 100, 500, 1,000 ounces when silver was $30, $40, $50, are sitting on something that is no longer just a commodity position. It is a strategic position. Now here is where I want to be genuinely direct with you, because this channel earns nothing by telling you what you want to hear rather than what you need to think about. Owning physical silver at this moment comes with a set of decisions that most stacking guides were never written to address. Because most stacking guides were written for a world where silver was undervalued, ignored, and cheap. The advice was simple: accumulate at low premiums, store securely, wait patiently. That framework got you here. It does not automatically tell you what to do now that you have arrived. The question of whether to hold, to add on dips, to diversify into silver mining equities that give you leveraged exposure to the silver price, or to begin converting portions of your physical stack into other assets? That is not a question with a universal answer. It depends on your timeline, your tax situation, your storage costs, your liquidity needs, and your assessment of where silver goes from here. What I can tell you is the framework my brother and I use for thinking about this transition. There are three categories of holder right now, and they require three completely different postures. The first category is the patient accumulator. Someone who stacked silver as a long-term wealth preservation strategy, is not dependent on the proceeds, and believes the structural supply story has years left to run. For this person, nothing about the current price changes the thesis. The thesis was never about timing the market. It was about owning a scarce real asset in a world of abundant paper. At $94, that thesis has not been disproved. It has been validated. And the supply data suggests it still has significant room to run. The second category is the strategic converter, someone who stacked silver as one leg of a broader precious metals position and is now asking whether some of that silver exposure should migrate into gold at a 56-to-1 ratio, into silver mining equities that have significantly underperformed the physical metal in the current rally and may represent the next phase of this trade, or into other hard assets that have not yet repriced to reflect the same macro environment that drove silver to $94. The third category is the one most people in the silver community are least prepared to discuss because it runs against the culture of stacking. The person for whom the paper gains are now large enough relative to their overall financial situation that some degree of disciplined profit-taking and rebalancing is financially appropriate. Not because silver is done, but because risk management is not a betrayal of a thesis. It is the thing that ensures you are still in the game to capture the next leg. Where do you sit among those three? Only you can answer that honestly. And the answer depends on information that is specific to your life, your balance sheet, your timeline, information that no YouTube channel, no matter how research-driven, can substitute for a real conversation with a qualified financial advisor who understands your complete picture. What I can give you is the analytical foundation, the market data, the structural context, the competitor landscape, Samsung locking up mine output, China locking down exports, Fresnillo cutting guidance, 6 consecutive years of deficit, and a supply curve that cannot respond for a decade. These are the forces pressing on the asset you are holding. Understanding those forces is not the same as knowing what to do with them, but it is the prerequisite. And right now, most silver holders are walking around with $94 silver in their safe and a $30 mental model in their head. That gap is the most dangerous thing in the room. I want to hear from you directly in the comments. Not where you think silver is going. Tell me where you are in your stacking journey right now. Are you still accumulating? Have you started thinking about what comes next? Has the move from $30 to $94 changed how you think about your position, your timeline, your strategy? And if you own between 100 and 1,000 ounces, the range this video was specifically written for, what is the single biggest question you are sitting with right now that you have not been able to find a clear answer to? Write it below. Because the people watching this channel are the serious ones, the ones who did the work, who stacked when it was unfashionable, who understood the supply math before the institutions did. And right now, this community deserves a conversation that is as serious as the moment it is living through. The major shift just started. The question is whether you are ready for the version of it that comes next.